Hi, Alpha Make a Mom, and I'm here to show you kombucha, and I'm going to try to do it within 10 minutes time from beginning to end. There's going to be parts that you're going to miss, but hopefully you'll get a better general idea of how to do it. So I just boiled some distilled water, and I'm going to tell you there's a lot of different things on the internet. People use different sources of water. I say never use tap water, but other than that, distilled water is the way I initially learned it from someone on the internet. That's not available anymore. So I got distilled water. I poured, and typically they say pour the whole gallon in there because you want to clean out any impurities that might be in there with distilled water. I pour half of it in there, or half of it. I've been doing this for at least 7 or 8 years, so I've gotten way more comfortable than I was at the beginning. So what I do, I boiled it for enough time that, 5 minutes or so. And then I use these things to keep all the different tea leaves, because I use loose tea, and that way I don't get tea leaves floating all in my water. So this is a backup. That's the only, I use stainless steel, because remember, anything that you use, you don't want to use plastic or anything that will cause impurities to get into your drink. So sometimes I have to kind of finagle this here to make sure that nothing escapes, and sometimes it does escape a little bit, and I just have to go swim them out. So I'm going to let that sit there for the time being that I'm showing you other things. So here are some of the tea brands. Always use a good tea is one of my suggestions. They also have other teas that you can use. They talk about green teas and other teas. I learned black tea only, and I'm sticking to black tea. One of the sources that's very knowledgeable is this book called The Big Book of Kombucha. And she mentions about other kind of teas and other kinds of ways to do it. And I don't know how long she's been doing it, but she does it a lot. So it's been pretty interesting, some of the things that she's shown. I only use, I use organic white sugar. I've never used evaporated cane juice. She says it's really good. And I've never used any of these other types of sweeteners. Honey can't be raw. I know that honey, if it has other bacteria in it, can cause a problem here with mold and stuff like that. But this book will give you all that more detail, and I'm not going to tell you all the details. I'm just kind of running it through why I kind of use what I use, and basically it's because that's how I learned it, and it has been working. So these are some teas from that book, the lady who wrote that book, The Big Book of Kombucha, and they're really good. They smell good. But prior to knowing about her, for years I used it from a bulk tea store, and then they went out of business, and I just go on there and try to find a good black tea. And I smell it, and if it smells really good, your tea is going to taste like that. So that's that portion of it. As that's sitting and steeping, I'm going to show you a batch that I just pulled out. It's been 10 days. I always mark it with like a marker on there so I remember after 10 days. I cover it. There's different ways. You don't want to use cheesecloth. I've had gnats, little fly, what do you call those little gnats, get into my tea before when I one time had a little bit of a crack. So you don't, you want to use something that they can't get through to. And I use a natural coffee filter. But there are bags and different things like that. So what I'm going to do now is there's your Scoby, which stands for Symbiotic Culture of Bacteria and Yeast. And they call it a Scoby or a baby. So you're going to be having babies, for those of you who are interested in having babies. And so what I do is I pour it out. And I'm going to tell you the other thing I do, and kind of mess myself up because I'm trying to do it so quick. So I'm going to pour out my tea out of there, and I typically use my strainer here. I'm going to use this strainer, and I'm going to pour these into, because there's a lot of culture. Let's see if I can get her to take a look down in here. This really weird, and they may seem really gross to you when you first start doing it, hanging things, and the questions you ask, is this normal? Is this bacteria? It's kind of freaky, and I freaked out at the beginning. There's definitely a time frame that you just kind of freak out about what the Scoby is doing, but that's all really natural. So now I have just some of the tea itself, and it still has some little hangers and stuff in it, and most people don't like to drink those. So I use a strainer and a filter, and I just pour it into these type of bottles. I like to have fizz carbonation in my, and you see right now that there's some natural carbonation coming off. Now remember, this carbonation you get from a homemade brew as opposed to a store-bought brew is, store-bought brews can add their own carbonation, so you're not typically going to get the same type of carbonation that you get in store-bought brews. So I like to have carbonation. There's definitely a technique and ways to create that carbonation, and I'm going to show you. I do second brews on mine, which means I add flavoring to it after I poured it into here. So this is ready to drink, and I could drink it right now if I wanted to, but I give myself 3 days to longer to let my second brew go. So I'm pouring these in here. You can use any other, you should always use glass, so you can use other containers, but these containers seal really well. I've used old kombucha bottles that are, other store brand kombucha bottles, because they're nice bottles, but even though they seem like they seal well, they don't hold in all of the air, and some of it slowly escapes, and you won't get as high of a carbonation. And these things work really good. And what I did with these, I bought them at Sprouts. They had like lemonade, Italian lemonade or something in there, and I got them when they were on sale, so I had the I want to say I paid less than $1 for these bottles with lemonade in them. And so now I have my bottles, and I just keep them. I have quite a few of them. And so leave a little bit of the liquid in there. I'm going to leave probably a little bit less than this. You only need about a half a cup to a cup of liquid. This is a gallon container. As you see, I bought, it needs to be a glass container. This is like the perfect size. I've used other containers. The Scoby will fit the size of the containers, and it'll grow to that size. So I've used ones that are bigger like this, trying to find a gallon container, and my Scoby was gigantic. So if you can't find them online, which they are hard to find online, you can go to Walmart or Sam's Club, and they sell these big containers of pickles, and so that's what I use. And I try to fill them up pretty close up to the top, because then again you get a better carbonation with it. And my deal is I don't like flat kombucha at all. Okay, so these are pretty good. I'm going to save that because I think I'm going to make some for some of my friends to take and have a bottle of their own. So I'm going to double this recipe next time. I've tried continuous brew, which is a cool thing, but I wasn't having great success with it, so I stopped, and maybe I'll go back to it. If you notice, I use glass here. I have plastic here, but it only runs through there really quick. Oh, no, I'm good. Okay, sorry. I'm thinking we got sugar, but that's for that. Okay, so the next thing I do is I found these things off of, these are actually from Amazon, and they're Brew Boosters, and they have different flavors, and I'm going to buy a couple more next time. But I add about, you don't have to add a lot. It tells you directions on the back, like a teaspoon or whatever, and then it tells you if you want to make sure you get extra carbonation, you can add a little bit more sugar to it. I stopped doing that. I just decided to try it without it. And so I'm adding maybe, no, it looks like that much. You don't have to add that much to it. So I'm going to do 2 of them with orange blossom lemon drops. I'm going to just add them in here. This is about, maybe it's like a tablespoon or a little bit less than a tablespoon. And I just kind of add them like that. I want a little bit more because I like a lot of flavor. And this second brew with this in there will give you, when you pour it, you'll have carbonation. You can have carbonation like this much. When I've been adding sugar, I literally have to have another container because we've had it explode everywhere and on the walls and on the ceiling. And I didn't really like that much carbonation because it seemed like half of it was getting thrown all over the house. So I don't add the sugar in there to keep the carbonation from exploding when I open it up. And this one this time I'm using wild berry marmalade. And I think when you first do this, you may not want to add this to all your containers because you want to taste your tea, and your kombucha is going to have the flavor of the tea. So if you don't, these are not flavored teas. They have a odor and a flavoring to them, but they're not like, this one is called Tropical Passion. And I have never found replacement for my old Passion tea that I used to get went out of business, which is sad because it was so good. And it always had really good fizz. Okay, so these 4 bottles are done. I'm trying to add, I'm going to add some more kombucha to these. I think I am. And you don't have to filter this at this stage. You can put it in there with the goopy stuff too. There was a little blob of goopy stuff. So the mold, I once had mold and it was recent and it literally looked like the greenish mold that you see on food items or cheese or whatever. So it was obvious. It wasn't just like weird hanging stuff. So I'm going to top these off a little bit more just to keep carbonation high. And now close them up. And now I'm going to let 3 days minimum. I set them up in the cabinet in a little dark space. And I'm going to put those away for 3 days. And obviously when I open this up, we'll drink it in a day or two. And then this one will end up being 4 days, 5 days. So sometimes they're there for, you know, a week. Okay, so that's how you, once you've boiled it and made it, that's how you make the second half of it. So here's some babies. And what happens with the Scoby, and I'm going to touch these because as at this point my hands are clean. You don't really want to touch it with anything plastic, or that's not natural. And here is the mother. And here's a Scoby. It reminds me of chicken skin. It almost looks like a piece of chicken if you look close up. But it has weird things like this attached, which is just all that culture on it. And then the baby is kind of thin. And there's different reasons for your babies to be thin or whatever, but the mother's in there and it's supporting the baby. So what you can do with these is, like this one, you're going to throw it into your new batch. Each new batch has to have a Scoby in it, and it has to have some of your leftover culture in there. So what I'm going to do is, because this baby is kind of small, I think I'm going to make 2 batches. So, and then here is my baby hotel, or my Scoby hotel. And these are just a few different Scobies, and you got to keep liquid in them. And I keep this in the cabinet in case I have some friends going, hey, I want a Scoby. Or if something happens in my Scoby and I have backup. And I keep it the same way as I do my jars. I wrap it up with a rubber band and with a coffee filter. So that's just to let you know that. So this thing in the meantime is almost, looks like it's brewed pretty good. Looks like some of the tea got out and is into my thing, which is not a big deal. You'll just see it in your drink. Okay, so I'm going to press this out a little bit because I like to get all the flavoring out of it. And so that's done. There's my brew right there. And so then what I do is I get my measuring cup. My 1 cup measuring cup. I get my organic sugar. You don't even have to use organic, but you know, I do. And I throw it in there. And then I get my little mixer, kind of mix it all up. So the sugar kind of dissolves a little bit in there. And you're basically making tea. I mean, you're making kombucha is just like making tea, but in a huge amount, and then you just add the culture to it. The culture cannot take a lot of heat, so you have to wait till this cools off. And this is the part that I can either do another video, but you're not going to be able to see because I couldn't show you everything. And then I add the remainder. Actually, I've learned little shortcuts to make this go faster. I bought these, and these are things that if you want to check your temperature, if your kombucha doesn't stay within a certain temperature, I think it's 72, after 10 days, it can actually, that's when you start to get mold if it's been sitting there a long time and it hasn't gotten to a warm enough temperature. So now I'm pouring it into another gallon jug. I use stainless steel. Use something that doesn't leach anything into your drink. And then I'm going to add the rest of this distilled water. And I got to leave room because I still got to add some of that and the Scoby in there. So the higher you go, the more product you'll get when you're done. So I'm going to add it to almost the top. think I can add the rest because I won't be able to fit the other stuff in. So right now it's really hot, and I can put my hands on here. It's too hot to put the Scoby in. So the process now is I'm gonna wait till this cools off, probably an hour, it can be 2 hours. You don't want it to be too long because it can create also a bacteria in there that's not good. So what I'm gonna wait for is I'll probably just leave it kind of like this so no bugs or weird things get in it. And I'm gonna wait for like an hour or two, and when it's not cold, but it's just, it could be just minimally warm, I get my one Scoby out of here, and I'm probably gonna put the thicker one in there because it looks stronger. And I'm gonna get maybe half of this fluid with all the weird things floating in there, and I'm gonna pour it in there. Because again, you don't want to put the Scoby in when it's too hot because it kills the bacteria and the yeast that's growing in there. So, and then that's it. Then if depending on the date, count 10 days later, I write it on my jug because I forget what it is, and I rubber band it and I put it in a dark closet somewhere where it's not going to be being moved a lot. You don't want it to be moved or light exposed to it on a regular basis. So put it somewhere where it's dark and peaceful. If you're in colder climates, you can have a problem with keeping this warm. So what you can do there, actually make pads, like a heating pad that you set your jar on, and it can maintain the temperature it needs for 10 days. So that's usually, 10 days is usually the amount of time you want to do it, because it can get stronger. And if you read this book, or if you don't, you'll be fine if you don't read it. I just got this probably in the last year, and I've been doing this for years. So. But you can taste the difference. It starts to taste a lot less sweeter, and it can build an alcohol content in there. So if you want something that's alcoholic, just let it sit there for a long time. Other than that, I think I've hit all the targeted things, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Hit like, not really, but ask me questions, especially if you know who I am. All right.